Hey everybody, welcome to Northwoods Productions. We're in the train container in the workshop and we're going to work on weathering of a bulldozer today. I'm in the middle of the spray booth project, but I need some parts from Home Depot to be able to finish that up. So tonight we're just going to change it up and just do something fun. Alright, so occasionally when I'm at Tractor Supply or anywhere else that has toys, I look and see if they got any HO scale stuff, and they did. Tractor Supply had a bulldozer, a road grader, and I think a wheel loader. So I picked up all those, but we're going to weather the bulldozer tonight. It's D5 Caterpillar. I think it's probably early 2000s, based on pictures I found. But I kind of do the same thing with weathering and basing what I want to do with the model off of pictures, just like I do trains. So I've got some pictures pulled up. So this is a little bit newer model than what we've got, but I'm just looking at weathering on the tracks, weathering on the blade, basically, right? This is a little bit cleaner than I want to go. This is basically the exact same dozer. I want to keep most of the upper part clean. You know, I kind of want to model a well-maintained machine, but obviously you have wear on your blade, wear on your tracks. I want a little bit of dirt on the tracks. And yeah, I got some good pictures of this one that was for sale. They're pretty easy to find for the most part. It's got all sides. You can kind of see how the blade wears a little bit there. So we'll do a little bit of dirt or rust on the side. And this one's a little bit dirtier. It's an older model. I think this one's probably newer than this. But if you wanted to do a little bit more on the tracks and on the running gear and all that, you could. All your little, your track structure there. So I just kind of got some options for how we could weather it. But I think we're going to go with this. Looks clean. Yeah, these aren't exactly the same. There's a few differences with the trim, but it's a D5M. That's what we've got here. So good enough to base this off of. I'm not going to use an airbrush. We're just going to do all paint brushing. Just dry brush and start with probably, I want it to look like it's been used recently. So more of a, we'll do bare metal on everything, and then maybe some surface rust, and then some deeper rust on the sides, I think. So weathering is layers of different colors of rust, different colors of grime, and you start with kind of your base layer. So what I'm going to start with is a silver. I've got aluminum and silver. I'm going to test them out and kind of see what it looks like. Thinking the silver will look better. Start with that base layer on the blade, on the tops of the tracks, and then we can do some weathering over top. Another thing I'll do as our rust will be a burnt umber and burnt sienna. Burnt umber is kind of that deeper rust, older rust. Burnt sienna kind of looks more like surface rust. It's a little bit more orange. And kind of the same thing with some weathering powder. So you got real orangey, which can kind of look fake if you overuse it. And then some brown, medium earth color. But what we'll do is we'll go over top of our acrylic paint with some weathering powders. And then I do have some gray, dark gray. A lot of times this works really well for showing detail. So I might do some on the grill here. And then it'll make some of these lines pop a little bit. The thing with weathering powders, they do wipe off, so we might ought to do a clear coat later on. But we'll see what it looks like. Weathering powders are nice because you can always take them off. Same with acrylic paint. I mean, they all come off pretty easily. The testers will not. That would be a little bit more of a project. But what we'll start with is just doing some bare metal spots. See what we want to do for that, referencing our pictures. And then we'll get into some rust. So I'm going to kind of use a square brush here, just because I'm covering a lot of surface. I'm not doing detail work. I'm basically doing the entire front of the blade, entire tops and bottoms of the tracks. So it doesn't need to be anything crazy with, you know, a fine brush. But we'll just start with that. I think that's going to turn out just fine. I think the biggest thing is not getting too much around the side. But when a dozer is being used, every surface that's being worn is bare metal. So it kind of depends on what you're trying to model. If you're modeling a dozer like in the middle of a scene, like pushing dirt, you're going to want to, yeah, you might have clumps of dirt stuck to it somewhere, but it's not really going to be rusty. Rusty's kind of reserved for something that's been sitting for a while, or an old piece of equipment that's not being used at all. But we're going to kind of model something in between. Maybe it's been recently used, but it's been rained on a couple times, but also well maintained to where the top isn't going to be grimy or nothing. I'll continue on the silver and then we'll move on to rust. Alright, tracks are silver, and honestly it kind of already adds another layer of detail to it. You know, Ertl, and this is a die-cast Masters, which I've never even heard of actually, but they don't quite produce the level of detail that we expect or are used to within metal railroading generally. But it's a 187th model for children, you know. Usually farm toys and big equipment, usually 1/64th scale. So it's nice to find something that's 1/87th, but you have to remember they aren't producing it for models. It has to be durable enough for children, basically. I mean, the front pivot on here is about 10 times the size of the real one. So we might do a little bit of rust on there, but if anything, we want to take some attention away from it. Obviously, our hydraulic cylinder is not anywhere near scale. That's actually something I should make silver. I forgot about that. I have to use a finer brush for that. Anyway, the inside, yes, it would be worn, but I'm not going to do silver. I'm going to do just rusty on the entire inside of the track, and then a little bit of rust within there. Yeah, I'm going to do this couple silver details I missed, and we'll get to rusting. Alright, so I did a little bit more silver. I decided what's being worn like currently from the sprocket on the inside I would do. And yeah, it's a little bit messy, but that whole back face we're going to do dark brown. But then the whole inside of the track is of what's touching the sprocket is war looking, right? And clean metal. And it can always be covered up, but we're going to move on to our brown color next. And we'll just kind of follow along our picture. But you're allowed to make things up also. Pictures are for reference so that something doesn't look like too far unrealistic, you know. It's just to give you a baseline and you can go from there. But it's hard to make up realism because things are kind of just one way, right? Generally, things wear a certain way. If you just make up the weathering pattern on a freight car, it'll kind of stand out from something that was based off a picture. So this is just the burnt umber. And what we're going to do, sometimes I'll do multiple colors, like that burnt sienna. We'll probably do a little bit of that also. But that's a weathering technique I learned back in the day from Monster Railroad. And I don't know if he still makes videos or not. But he was kind of, when I was young, first guy I really saw weathering freight cars and engines the way I liked. And learned a lot from him. But he does burnt umber as a base. and then burnt sienna is like a little smaller area in the middle, and then weathering powders to blend those two colors together. And this is some shiny plastic, so it's not going to take paint well. So it might take a couple layers to get it to hold, but kind of get the concept. We'll just do rust where it needs it, all the wear spots, especially up in here where things touch the ground when you're really pushing rocks and dirt and stuff. I think the fun thing is I only buy tractors and equipment that I've actually ran. So like I've ran bulldozers like this, and a lot of the excavators I have, I've ran, you know, at least something similar in size. Same with tractors, but it's kind of cool to have a record of everything you've operated. All right, so got some good rust going on down there. Just hit some highlight spots and stuff like that. Yeah, I think so. What we're going to do is do the dark weathering powder in there. And I'm going to see what the bright orange looks like on the blade and maybe on the tops of the tracks. But weathering powders are kind of tough because you can overdo them easily. But they do blend things out a little bit nicer for sure. And you can definitely tone down your paint. But just know it wipes off. So you can kind of go back to the way it was. Obviously you could wash off with water. But there's lots of methods of using it where you do wipe it off intentionally. I think I don't want to do too much, because this is just supposed to be lightly used, but my lighting's a little bit bright for this, honestly. If there's anything else you just want to tone down, like I think I want to tone down the entire blade. This isn't going to pick up super great on my camera here, but definitely cuts down the gloss paint. Another way of cutting down the gloss is just by doing a matte clear coat on it. But there are spots I want to be shiny. Equipment has lots of different tones within it, so say they pressure washed the cab and pressure washed everything, there are spots that are just, those shines wore off, right? So this could be, honestly, if you're looking at it, this could be a completely freshly pressure washed unit, but the wear is just what you're seeing here. So I went over all the bare surfaces with the medium rust color, this orange stuff, the tracks and the blade, and kind of toned down that shine. Obviously in the light still is pretty shiny, but honestly looks like surface rust in certain lighting. Not the bright light I got, but that turned out pretty good. And then I went over a lot of the body lines with this dark gray, and those all really popped nicely. So you can see the lines on the side, lines on your hood, for a little bit at least. It's better than it was. Kind of allows some of those details to pop. So I meant to hit record on that, but I missed it. But there's not really much to it. Just kind of go over it lightly with the brush, and then you can brush some off if you get too heavy. You can wipe it off with your finger if you get too heavy. I think that's what happened on the hood here. I actually wiped a little too much off with my finger, but it definitely took it well. It says self-adhering powder. And the other thing it'll adhere to is fingerprints. So if you are touching it a bunch, which I have been, kind of wants to stick a little more in those spots. But I think we're about where I want it, so turned out pretty good. All right, that's how we took a kind of a not very detailed model, but really brought some life to it. make it look a little used and have the details that it does have pop. I think that's kind of what you're going for a lot of the times. Not every model needs to be super detailed, and this really isn't a very fancy one, but makes it a lot better than a shiny bulldozer sitting there on your model railroad. Alright you guys, thanks for checking out the video. I think it turned pretty good. I don't have a scene to put it in yet because I'm not building a model railroad at the moment. But if you haven't seen my videos, I've just got a 40-foot shipping container. I built a 10-foot room for my workspace for model trains. And the other 30 feet out that door are going to be, that's going to be the layout itself eventually. But I'm finally able to do some projects that I just enjoy doing, and I'm working on a spray booth right now, right over there. A little sneak peek, but the video on the spray booth build will be coming out soon. And thank you guys for checking it out. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one.